Dushkarataram Pashunam Viklavatmanam Dehanyasam Chatasyaivam Dhiranam Dharyavardhanam Anyesham Dushkarataram Pashunam Viklavatmanam Dehanyasam Chatasyaivam Dhiranam Dharyavardhanam Anyesham Dushkarataram Pashunam Viklavatmanam Dehanyasam Chatasyaivam Vardhanam Anyesham Dushkarataram Pashunam Viklavatmanam Chitasyaivam Vardhanam Dushkarataram Pashunam Viklavatmanam Dehanyasam Chatasyaivam Dhiranam Dharyavardhanam Anyesham Dushkarataram Pashunam Viklavatmanam. Matajis? Dehanyasam Chatasyaivam Dhiranam Dharyavardhanam Anyesham Dushkarataram Pashunam Viklavatmanam. Okay, synonyms. Dehanyasam, entering the body. Cha, also. Tasya, his. Evam, also. Dhiranam, of great sages. Dharya, perseverance. Vardhanam, increasing. Anyesham, for others. Dushkarataram, very difficult to ascertain. Pashunam, of the beasts. Viklava, disturbed. Atmanam, or Atmanam, of such a mind. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The Lord's glorious acts and His acceptance of various transcendental forms for the performance of extraordinary pastimes in the mortal world are very difficult for anyone other than His devotees to understand. And for the beast, they are simply a mental disturbance. Purport. The transcendental forms and pastimes of the Lord, as described in Bhagavad Gita, are difficult subject matters for those who are not devotees to understand. The Lord never reveals Himself to persons like jnanis and yogis. And there are others who, because of their envying the Lord from the bottom of their hearts, are classified amongst the beasts. And for such envious beasts, the subject matter of the Lord's appearance and disappearance is simply a mental disturbance. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 7:15, the miscreants who are simply covered with material enjoyment and who work very hard like beasts of burden can hardly know the personality of Godhead at any stage due to asurika bhava, or a spirit of revolt against the Supreme Lord. The transcendental bodily expansions manifested by the Lord for His pastimes in the mortal world and the appearance and disappearance of such transcendental expansions are difficult subject matters, and those who are not devotees are advised not to discuss the Lord's appearance and disappearance, lest they commit further offenses at the lotus feet of the Lord. The more they discuss the transcendental appearance and disappearance of the Lord in the asuric spirit, the more they enter into the darkest region of hell, as stated in Bhagavad Gita 16:20. Anyone who is against the transcendental loving service of the Lord is more or less a beastly creature, as confirmed in this verse of Srimad Bhagavatam. Om Agyana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Mano Bhishtam Shtapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utaf Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raganathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Prijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Panchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Danavirga Swamini Tinamine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamini Tinamine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. So the persons who are envious of the Lord and don't want to hear about him are described as beasts, because the hearing about the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the purpose of the human form of life, and that's the difference between the human beings and the animals. We can see animals are eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. And human beings are also eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, sometimes in just a more polished way. The dog is sleeping on the street, and the human being, he gets to sleep in some apartment. But once they're both asleep, there's no difference. It's the same enjoyment is going on. So the difference then between the human being and the animal, it's not in the way that they eat, sleep, and mate, and defend, but the difference is that the human being has higher intelligence, so they can use that intelligence to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead and engage in his service. They can use the human form of life for hearing properly. And by hearing transcendental subject matters about the Lord, then one can be transferred to their eternal transcendental existence as a servitor of the Lord. So, there's a verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Shavid Vara Hoshra Karai Samstuta Purusha Pashu Na Yat Karma Pato Peto Jatu Nama Gada Garjaha. Men who are like dogs, hogs, camels, and asses, praise those men who never listen to the transcendental pastimes of Lord Sri Krishna, the deliverer from evils. So, Gada Garjaha. Lord Krishna, the deliverer from evils. Krishna is the deliverer from all sorts of evils of this material world. He's the only one who can actually deliver someone from the cycle of birth and death. By engaging in his service, one can be transferred to their eternal position, always engaging in his service in the spiritual world. But in the material world, those who are envious of him and who want to stay here repeatedly doing the same activities. It's described as chewing the chewed. So already so many people have tried to get happiness through getting some money, or getting many beautiful women, or getting nice health, or a nice house, or all of these things. It's already been done so many times. So it's described as chewing the chewed. We can see anyone in the material world who's strived for some sort of material opulence, they're not actually happy. But still, materialists keep trying to get these things, so they're just chewing what's already been chewed, like a piece of sugar cane that you chew on it for some time, it has some taste, and if someone throws it out and then you pick it back up and chew on it again, it's tasteless, it's disgusting. So those who want to stay in the material world, chewing the chewed, they really don't like to hear about Krishna. And we see this example sometimes on book distribution, where you might go up to somebody in a very like positive spirit, and you're like, hey man, like you're so cool looking, like you're like the best guy here, and they're very happy to see you. And then you're like, here, check this out. And they're like, oh, what do you have? And they're still enthusiastic. And then right when they see that it's one of Srila Prabhupada's books, it's like they've seen a ghost or something. They become terrified. Oh, no, I'm actually okay. I'm just here on vacation. And they start going in the opposite direction. I've seen this a few times where people actually, if it was just a mundane book like Harry Potter or something, they wouldn't be so disturbed. But they see one of Srila Prabhupada's books, and they immediately start running away. Because for the beast, these topics about the Supreme Personality of Godhead are simply a mental disturbance. For one who wants to stay in the material world, they're actually advised in the Shastra never to see Krishna, who's standing on the bank of the river Yamuna, or it's a certain ghat, Keshi Ghat. They're advised not to go there and not to see him. If they at all want to enjoy friends, family, so-called love in the material world, then they shouldn't see him. Because if one sees Krishna, then immediately they're purified of all their nonsense. Their attachment to material things can be immediately purified by seeing the form of the Lord. There's many statements in the Nectar of Devotion that explain how if one sees the face of the deity in the temple during an arti, then immediately all of their material contamination is vanquished. Or if one claps for the Lord during a kirtan, all their sinful reactions fly off like many birds flying out of a tree. So just by coming in contact with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one's material life is more or less finished. So for those who want to remain in material existence, that's very disturbing. So these, but that's not even a normal position to be in, wanting to be separate from the Lord. So therefore, those persons are described as beasts. It's a minority group to be in this material world. It's described as 1/4 of the whole creation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, this material world. So the normal persons, most of them are in the spiritual world, eternally engaging in the Lord's service. But for those who are envious of the Lord, who want to try to lord it over material nature, then they stay here trying to be like a separate Supreme Personality of Godhead. And because of this mentality of trying to lord it over material nature and trying to enjoy, the living entities are always in anxiety. Because by trying to become the enjoyer, which that spot is already taken by Krishna, one more or less becomes his competitor. And to compete with Krishna is a very fearful situation, as we can learn very easily from the Bhagavatam and the Krishna book. When we see anyone who comes in contact with Krishna in an envious spirit, they're destroyed very quickly. I was just reading about Panchajanya. Is that what he had the conch shell as part of his body? Yeah, Panchajanya, I was just reading about when he tries to fight Krishna. It's very quick. It's very, very short description. In the Krishna book, in the Bhagavatam, also in the Garga Samhita, it's very quickly described that after like one attack from Panchajanya, Krishna becomes furious and punches him, and he's finished. So for one who tries to enjoy this material world in the spirit of becoming a competitor to the Supreme Lord, it's an extremely fearful position. They're always in anxiety because no one can compete with the Supreme Lord. He's full of all opulences. He's full of all mystic potencies. The yogis, they actually meditate on the chest of the Supreme Lord, which is the reservoir of all mystic powers. That's described in the Bhagavatam when it's speaking about seeing the form of the Lord from his feet up to his smiling lotus face. So he's the most powerful. Nobody can compete with him. But such envious beasts do try to compete with him. And they always become frustrated. We can see in the examples like Ravana, he was taught and explained to very nicely that Lord Ram is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, nobody can beat him. In the Ramayana, when he was speaking to one of his associates and explaining that he wants to devise this plan to go and kidnap Mother Sita, who's the person who takes the form of the deer? That Rakshasa? Maricha. When he's explaining to Maricha that he wants him to take this form of a deer, they'll go and they'll kidnap Mother Sita, Maricha gives this really a beautiful description of Lord Ramachandra, actually. It's really nice glorification, where he's talking about how terrified he is of Lord Ramachandra. He explains that ever since he tried to fight against him and was thrown something like 8,000 miles away or 800 miles away just by an arrow of Lord Ramachandra's, he was thrown by this arrow all the way into the sea. He explains ever since then he's always in fear. Whenever he's outside, he's thinking all of the trees are Lord Ram. Whenever he hears someone starting a word with R, he becomes very fearful, thinking they might say Rama. And like this, he's completely terrified because he sees that this person, he's more powerful than the waves of the ocean. He's completely immeasurable. He can't be beaten. So even after hearing all of this nice description about Lord Ramachandra, still Ravana thinks, actually, I'm the boss and you have to do what I say. He tells him more or less. And so Maricha disguises himself as the deer, and we understand later on everyone related to Ravana is wiped out. Except for one Rakshasa who is smart enough to take the side of Lord Rama. With Hiranyakashipu, even he was so foolish to try to fight against Lord Nrsimhadev. At some point, he actually recognized in the fight between him and Lord Nrsimhadev that it wasn't such a good idea. There's in the Srimad Bhagavatam, I don't remember what verse it is exactly, but I remember briefly in the fight between him and Nrsimhadev, he realizes that he becomes fearful and realizes that this might not be such a good idea. But still, he tries to fight Lord Nrsimhadev very foolishly, just like a beast, and is very easily destroyed, like a wasp between one's fingernails. So there's so many examples of these demons. Kamsa also, he was thinking that he could easily solve his problem, that the 8th son of his sister Devaki would kill him. So if he just kills the 8th son, then there's no problem. He'll be good to go. And even after having so much knowledge and so many clear warnings that this wasn't going to work out, he kept trying, just like an animal. If you see, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. Or any animal, they don't have much knowledge. If you ask a dog to come and attend the Bhagavatam class, it won't be possible. But a human being is supposed to have more intelligence than the animals and use their human form of life for cultivating God consciousness. But we see those who are like animals, even after hearing so much about the Lord and understanding so much, they can't get the point. And ultimately they're destroyed by him, and either personally, like we hear of the Asuras throughout the Bhagavatam and the other scriptures, or they're destroyed by him in his form of time, which takes away everything that they were identifying with and thinking that they were the Lord of. So Kamsa, he was also actually pretty smart. I was reading with Mahotsav Prabhu in the Garga Samhita how Kamsa, he approached Lord Parshuram. He was causing a lot of disturbance. Kamsa was lifting up this Mount Mandara that Parshuram was doing some austerities on top of. He's repeatedly lifting the mountain and dropping it down. So Parshuram gets very disturbed, and he comes down from the mountain and sees Kamsa, and he tells him, "O worm and stool, O baby crab, I will kill you." So that's Parshuram. He's very intense. And he was thinking that this is just another Kshatriya, another stupid Kshatriya for me to destroy. But Kamsa, he actually had very nice understanding of the Vedas. And he tells Parshuram that, "O Supreme Lord, I am the servant of your servants. Please protect me." So he gets the point, das anudas, that one should become the servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But unfortunately, like others who might also take to devotional service but want some personal benefit or material motive, Kamsa uses the philosophy for the wrong reason. He tells him, "I am the servant of your servants. so that he can try to get some personal benefit from Parshuram. But the thing is, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is very merciful, so by submitting to him, at least with this proper understanding, Parshuram actually spared him. And instead of killing him immediately, he told him, if you can string this bow, I won't kill you. So Parshuram had a bow that was the length of 7 palm trees, and it weighed some incredible weight that was described in there, something like 2 million pounds. It was something insane. It was more than a rocket ship. I remember that comparison. It was more than one of the, like Apollo or one of these huge rockets. So Kamsa immediately takes this bow, strings it, and he twangs the string 100 times, because to show that you're better than someone, you do some activity 100 times. Just like when, the Ashvamedha Yagya, who was it? Prithu? Prithu Maharaj wanted to perform 100 Ashvamedha Yagyas, and when he got to the 99th, Indra realized if he does that, people will know he's better than me. So he does this whole pastime, he's an illusion, dressing up as a sannyasi and taking away the horse so that he can't do the last Ashvamedha Yagya. So Kamsa, he twangs the bow 100 times, and then Parshuram lets him off the hook, and he tells him, you can have this bow, but when this bow breaks, you will die. Whoever breaks this bow will kill you. So Kamsa, he sends so many demons to kill Lord Krishna. He sends Putana. She's crazy, a giant witch. She'd be taller than the clouds if we saw her in her normal form. Huge witch. It was like several miles, it's described, when she fell down. And she's used to killing tons and tons of children. That's just what she does. Krishna killed her immediately, just by, in his cute baby form, accepting her milk as a mother. He didn't have to do anything very challenging. I've heard this example sometimes, that the depiction that is sometimes shown in the West of a supreme being or God is this idea of Atlas, where he's carrying the world and he's got these huge bulging muscles and he's kind of really struggling to lift it. But that idea, it doesn't compare at all to the real Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. He can do anything simply by his will. It's already done. Just one of his limbs performs the function of all of the other limbs, like we sing every morning in the Brahma Samhita. Angani yasya sakalendriya vrittimanti. Just one of his indriyas, his senses, performs the activities of all other senses. So he can accept the offerings that the devotees make with his ears, with his eyes, in any way. So easily Krishna destroyed all of these demons that Kamsa sent to him. And none of them were like small work. They were big, like we see people on book distribution. Sometimes we say, you look like the big boss, or something about being a big boss. So these demons, they were like that. They were the big bosses in the material world. I mean, nobody could mess with them, except for Kamsa. He easily subdued all of the demons that we hear that get sent to Krishna, and they're making a disturbance in Vrindavan. All of them, they were nearly invincible, but for Kamsa, they were easy. He destroys some of them with one punch. He takes, it was described in the Garga Samhita that he grabs Kuvalayapida, throws him, I think by his legs. He throws Kuvalayapida, the huge elephant that tried to kill Krishna. He throws him into the army of Jarasandha, and that's when Jarasandha and him became friends. Jarasandha was pleased with that, and he offered his daughters as Kamsa's wives. So these demons, they were nearly invincible, but Kamsa could defeat them. And when he sent them to Krishna, Krishna destroyed each of them one after another, but still Kamsa couldn't get the clue that this person is much more powerful than me and much more powerful than everyone who's ever existed. And that makes some sense because Kamsa himself was very powerful, so it makes sense that he might be a little proud. But at a certain point, it should be obvious that there's no way that someone is going to overcome the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I say it should be obvious, but then even for me, every day I'm thinking, okay, I can somehow become like the big guy in this world. So sometimes people ask that question about with the Brahma Vimohana Lila, like how is it that Lord Brahma forgot the position of Krishna? And sometimes I hear this answer given that, well, how is it that they'll say to the person asking, how is it that you're forgetting? And how is it that we're forgetting like almost every day, thinking, okay, I can somehow be happy in this material world separate from Krishna. I can be the enjoyer. I can arrange things just perfectly so that I'm the center of things. So we see those who are like beasts, they think like this. They think that they can be a separate supreme personality of Godhead, but they don't understand that actually they are Jivara Srupahoy Krishna and Nityadas. They're always the servant of Krishna. Either they're serving him personally, engaging in devotional service, which is actually for their benefit as well, or they're ignorantly trying to enjoy separately, and they're engaging in the service of his material energy, Maya, which is very difficult to overcome. Daivi Hesha Guna Mai Mama Maya Duratyaya. It's very difficult to overcome this divine energy of the Lord. In fact, it's impossible for those who are trying to use some material method to overcome it. But to one who surrenders unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, it becomes very easy. So we see with these beastly creatures, the demons, such as Kamsa, they're over and over again struggling against him, even with all indication that it's not going to happen. They're not going to be able to overcome Krishna in any way. So with Kamsa, once Krishna broke his bow, that was another indication that, okay, you're going to die soon, but still, he made so many arrangements to try to kill him, and eventually he was defeated very quickly by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada was explaining that the miscreants who are simply concerned with material enjoyment work very hard, like beasts of burden, and can hardly know the personality of Godhead at any stage due to asurika bhava, or a spirit of revolt against the Supreme Lord. So these kinds of persons are described throughout the Vedas, which is it's 99% of the world. The whole world is pretty much suffering, not pretty much suffering, the whole world is suffering due to want of Krishna consciousness. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur explained how there's no lacking in this world except for a lacking of Krishna consciousness. So that means the whole world is more or less a bad association for one who wants to come to the perfection of life and engaging in the pure devotional service of the Lord. And sometimes people would ask Srila Prabhupada about this, well, how can we're associating with karmis and demons all day out on book distribution and preaching? And some of the answers that I've heard for this have been very nice, such as that, well, actually, we don't associate with them. We shouldn't, that's the point. But we should give them our association. And another way I've heard that summed up by my Guru Maharaj is that they take our books, we don't take theirs. So when we go for book distribution, it's the perfect arrangement because all of these beastly people are getting engaged in the service of the Lord. Anyone who's not engaging in the service of the Lord is described in the scriptures as a beast because they're not going beyond the bodily platform of life that the beasts and animals are on, thinking, I am this body, anything around this body and in my possession, I can enjoy. But a human being realizes that actually, through their higher intelligence, good use of hearing, and association of devotees, they can become fortunate and hear from the devotees that actually you're an eternal servitor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So anything you so-called possess should be engaged in his service. This is in the Madhya Lila, chapter 22, text 86. If you could put that on the screen. This is explaining how one should actually use the human form of life for hearing properly and associating with devotees, and in this way give up the beastly mentality of trying to enjoy the material world or have some separate existence from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Satam prasangan mama virya samvido bhavanti hrit karna rasayana kataha Taj jo shanad ashva pavarga vartmani shraddha ratir bhaktir anu kramishyati. The spiritually powerful message of Godhead can be properly discussed only in a society of devotees, and it is greatly pleasing to hear in that association. If one hears from devotees, the way of transcendental experience quickly opens, and gradually one attains firm faith in due course, that in due course develops into attraction and devotion. So this is how one can make progress towards the goal of life, is actually by associating with devotees and hearing from them narrations about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In this way, one can quickly advance towards the goal of life and attain, as was stated in the verse, they can develop attraction and devotion to the Lord simply by hearing. So everyone in this material world being forgetful of the Lord, they're attracted to so many nonsense things. Different objects of sense enjoyment, different plans for how to make the material world a so-called nice place that never seem to work out, and then they make another plan. So many nonsense things people are attracted to in the material world, and because of that, they don't have attraction for the all-attractive Supreme Personality of Godhead. But Krishna is all-attractive, so the condition of the conditioned soul in this material world, it's described as being like an iron filing that's covered with rust. So if it's rusted, it won't automatically move toward an attractive magnet. But by clearing away the rust, then the natural condition of the iron is it goes right to the magnet. So even though naturally living entities would be attracted to Krishna, we see they're due to their rusted over condition of trying to enjoy in this material world, they become attracted to so many other things that actually are not for their benefit or anyone else's. Movies, restaurants, nasty foods, so many things. But if one hears from devotees, then the rust in the heart of the conditioned soul is removed, and they can very quickly become attracted to the Supreme Lord. Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita that one should always be thinking of him and 100% be engaged in his pure, loving, devotional service with love all the time. But if they can't do that, he explains to Arjuna that if you can't fix your mind on me, if our mind is not always thinking of Krishna and his service and the devotees and how to serve them, these things, if our mind is not 100% Krishna conscious, then what do? He tells Arjuna that then just engage in practice the regulative principles of Bhakti Yoga, and then you will develop a desire to attain me. So just like in this verse it's explaining, if one hears from devotees, they'll develop that attraction and devotion for the Lord. Similarly, if one practices the regulative principles of devotional service, which one of them is hearing, then they'll develop a desire to actually have pure love of Krishna and always engage in his service. Just the next verse down from this explains more about the beastly condition of material life, which is helpful to hear about because it's something that one who's aspiring for the perfection of life should avoid at all costs. So for instance, like when we're doing book distribution, we give them our books, we don't take their books. We don't want to associate with materialists, but one who's practicing devotional service will happily give the people, anyone that they meet, their association in the form of showing them Srila Prabhupada's books, telling them about, getting them to take the books, getting them to come to a Sunday feast, engaging them in the Bhakti program. But this verse is nice for understanding the condition of material existence. So, a Vaishnava should always avoid the association of ordinary people. Common people are very much materially attached, especially to women. Vaishnavas should also avoid the company of those who are not devotees of the Lord. So we see a devotee or someone who wants to become a devotee shouldn't associate with materialists or the objects of the senses, because in this way one gets entangled further in material existence. And in the next verse, further describing these beasts, who for the beast, Krishna is simply a mental disturbance, worldly people. By association with worldly people, one becomes devoid of truthfulness, cleanliness, mercy, gravity, spiritual intelligence, shyness, austerity, fame, forgiveness, control of the mind, control of the senses, fortune, and all opportunities. One should not at any time associate with a coarse fool who is bereft of the knowledge of self-realization and who is no more than a toy animal in the hands of a woman. The illusion and bondage that accrue to a man from attachment to any other object are not as complete as that resulting from association with a woman or with men too attached to women. And then the next text, it is better to accept the miseries of being encaged within bars and surrounded by burning flames than to associate with those bereft of Krishna consciousness. Such association is a very great hardship. And then there's one more. One should not even see those who are bereft of devotional service in Krishna consciousness, and who are therefore devoid of pious activities. Without hesitation, one should take exclusive shelter of Lord Krishna with full confidence, giving up bad association. And then there's more. So, these persons who are envious of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that association is clearly proscribed throughout all of the Vedas, that one should avoid it at all cost. Because by hearing from such persons, one's mind becomes contaminated. People who are disturbed by hearing about Krishna, they want to hear about so many nonsense things, and they put forward so many other theories about life in general, which are completely more disturbing, actually, to the mind. Like, instead of that everything is coming from a Supreme Personality of Godhead, Ishvara Parama Krishna, Satchit Ananda Vigraha, Anadir Adir Govinda Sarvakarna Karnam. That instead of that there's a Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, who has an eternal spiritual form made of eternity, bliss, and knowledge, who there's no one higher than him. There's no cause causing him. He's the cause of all causes. Instead of that, they say things like, well, actually, everything is coming from nothing. So this is actually a real disturbance to the mind, to think that everything is coming from nothing, there's no basis to life, or that instead of any intelligence being involved in the world that is around us, and in this whole, and in everything that we engage ourselves with, such as this body and material nature, anything in our life, instead of explaining that there's some intelligence and personality behind that, who is superior to us, a person of beastly mentality will say, actually, there's nothing there, and it's all just randomly happening. We can see this is just the same mentality as an animal. You can't look further into anything happening in this world. Instead, they say, actually, it's just happening. It's just, everything's going on randomly. And in such a state, we see people get so many real mental disturbances. They get anxiety, depression, become addicted to so many intoxicants, always chasing after illicit sex. So many real symptoms of mental disturbance are there. And it's actually, it's a lower than animal society, Srila Prabhupada explains throughout his books, because we see animals usually don't kill their children. They'll usually at least raise their children, but materialists who say there's no personality of Godhead, everything's coming from nothing, you can be God, all of these things, we see they kill their children by the millions every year. So that's one reason it's described as lower than animal society, but there's many. Another reason is for eating, an animal will happily take whatever food is given to it and eat what it needs. But we see in this so-called civilization, large companies will take huge amounts of grains and essential foods and dump them all into the ocean for some artificial scheme of making more money. So it's a lower than animal civilization. And for such people who are enamored with this civilization, hearing about Krishna is simply a mental disturbance. But if they get good association through receiving Srila Prabhupada's books or meeting devotees, they can understand that actually hearing about Krishna is the solution to all of their disturbances of life. Because all of their disturbance is coming from identifying with this body, thinking, I am the body, I can enjoy my senses, everything in relation to this body is mine, I can become the supreme. And this way one becomes so anxious because their whole life is centered on temporary things that will sooner or later be taken away from them. And so many disturbances are created. Such as death. Death is a big disturbance. Nobody likes it. Nobody wants to die. If anyone is threatened that they'll die soon, they'll very quickly start asking, like, no, actually, please, like, make some assurance that I'll be protected somehow or other. And people make so many big plans, insurance policies, hospitals, so many things to try to not die. But for one who is identifying with this body, they have to be extremely disturbed about death at all moments, because the thing that they think they are is going to die either today or tomorrow. But for one who is engaging in Krishna's service, that actually solves the problem of death, because by engaging in Krishna's service, one doesn't have to, as Queen Kunti prays, by seeing you, we no longer see repeated birth and death. So if one is associating with Krishna through his narrations, his devotional service, his devotees, then they're easily moving toward their eternal life in Krishna's service. In the spiritual world, everything is eternal, full of bliss and full of knowledge. In the material world, everything is temporary. So if one can situate themselves back in the spiritual world by engaging in Krishna's service, then they can easily no longer face birth and death. And it's not that they situate themselves in the spiritual world, but by engaging in Krishna's service and pleasing the spiritual master, then they can easily receive the mercy of the Lord and be reinstituted in their eternal position. There's some more points in the purport I can read here. The transcendental bodily expansions manifested by the Lord for his pastimes in the mortal world, and the appearance and disappearance of such transcendental expansions are difficult subject matters, and those who are not devotees are advised not to discuss the Lord's appearance and disappearance, lest they commit further offenses at the lotus feet of the Lord. So to understand Krishna is actually extremely difficult for one who's not a devotee, and it's impossible to be understood with their materially contaminated senses. If one's trying to understand the absolute truth through their senses that have always been engaged in material existence since time immemorial, trying to do things simply in relation to the body, trying to get some selfish personal enjoyment, those senses are materially contaminated, so they can't actually perceive the spiritual form of the Lord. But jivan mokhe hi jivado swayam eva sparatyada. For one who engages in the service of Krishna, which begins with the tongue, the jivado, the tongue, they can easily perceive Krishna. Krishna agrees to reveal himself to that devotee who he becomes pleased with. So, for a non-devotee, it's not possible to understand the Lord. Even we see people might make so much research, even into Vedic literature, but with some materialistic, scholarly perspective. There's that lecture that His Holiness Bhakti-Vikas Swami gave, I think in Salem. I think it might have also been about this pastime that we're now hearing about in this month of Kartik, where Mother Yashoda tries to bind Krishna with the rope to the grinding mortar. I think those classes were in that part of the Bhagavatam. But he was explaining how there was this one research scholar that he had heard of, and she's doing her whole project on Vaishnavism. She's like going to different places in India and studying with different people there. And after doing this for some time, she wakes up one day and she's looking at the sunrise and she's thinking, oh, this is very nice. And she begins to think, wow, I wonder what Srimati Radharani is thinking at this time. And then she goes, no, I can't think like that. I can't
because they have this idea that they can't become biased or swayed in their research papers. He says, no, I'm a scholar. And we hear in this lecture how you can hear how much Maharaj really cares for the fallen conditioned souls. He exclaims, "So close!" She almost had it. She was like that close to at least thinking something Krishna conscious, but instead, again, with this materialistic idea that, oh, no, this is something I'm researching. Everything in this world I can understand just with my senses and my mind, and through some experiment, and in this way I can learn what is all around me. She gave up the actual path of hearing from authorities and applying that knowledge. So we hear about Krishna from devotees, what that person had done. She's heard so many things from devotees, what's going on in Krishna's pastimes and different things. She's thinking about it for a second, but then immediately gives it up. No, actually, I'm just researching. I need to stick to my mind, my senses. So in this way, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he can never be understood, and his pastimes seem so confusing. Like in this month of Kartik, we're hearing a very confusing pastime of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, how even though he's bigger than the biggest, this whole universe that we're in is coming from his abdomen in his expansion as Mahavishnu. Everything comes from him. He's heavier than the heaviest, all of these things, but still at the same time, he's being chased and chastised by a simple cowherd woman. How is that possible? And like we sing in the prayers that his eyes were fearful and his breathing was quick. How is it that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is feared by fear personified, is now afraid? And what is he afraid of? It's a nice cowherd woman who's chasing after him. What is going on there? How is it possible? And then we also hear how Mother Yashoda, she's trying to bind Krishna to this grinding mortar, and he can't be bound. She has more than enough rope. She continually gets more rope to bind him, but every time she goes to tie it, it's not enough. So that part, to someone who's heard a little bit about Krishna, then that part might make some sense. That he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he's all-powerful, he possesses all mystic opulences, so now that's being seen. No matter what you do, you can't catch him. But then she keeps trying, and through her burden of love, this effort that she's making to tie Krishna, to protect him from doing mischievous activities, all of a sudden she ties him. The Supreme Personality of Godhead becomes bound. How is that possible? So for one who's not engaging in devotional service, it's completely impossible to understand. But for one who engages in the service of the Lord and the service of the Lord's representatives, the bona fide spiritual master, and hears from the previous acharyas, they can understand actually that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, although he is all-powerful, can never be bound or can't even be attained by the jnanis and yogis who search after him even at the speed of the mind. He can't be attained by all these people. By his sweet will, he agrees to be bound up or caught by his devotees who are engaging purely with pure love for him, that they just want to see that he is satisfied. The devotees who loves him, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he reciprocates with them and agrees to be attained by those devotees. He agrees to stay in the heart of the pure devotee who makes Krishna the center of his life. So in that way, Krishna can actually be caught and understood because he agrees to be caught by his pure devotee. There's a statement in the Nectar of Devotion that explains how devotional service is even powerful than the supremely powerful personality of Godhead. Because by devotional service, the Lord can actually be conquered. And further in the purport, the more they discuss the transcendental appearance and disappearance of the Lord and the asuric spirit, the more they enter into the darkest region of hell as stated in Bhagavad Gita. So yeah, those who speculate, they're not going to catch him, it's not going to work. I had one teacher in college who would actually tell us a lot about Krishna, and I think he even assigned for us to buy the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, which, that's pretty awesome. But I don't know how much he read of it himself. He would sometimes say, Achintya Beta Beta Tattva, it means simultaneously one and different, but I don't remember much more than that being like on point. And this teacher, I remember when he would try to describe the pastimes of the Lord, which he didn't get, I never saw any of Srila Prabhupada's books in that class, so he wasn't hearing like Bhagavatam or any of these things. So when he tries to describe the other pastimes of the Lord, just from his own mental speculation, it was really strange. I won't like say what the things that he was saying in the class, in a Bhagavatam class, but what he thought was going on in any of the pastimes, even just like simple, like even something just like the churning of the milk ocean, he would always like put some weird sexual twist on it. So this is what happens when those with an asuric, beastly mentality try to speak about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They move closer to the darkest region of hell by making further offenses. But we hear in the purport that anyone who is against the transcendental loving service of the Lord is more or less a beastly creature, as confirmed in this verse of Srimad Bhagavatam. So by receiving the Bhagavatam, those who are in the beastly state of life can easily learn that they are a beastly creature. Like Amiyatma Prabhu was explaining, he was talking to somebody in Gatlinburg and telling them, please don't live like a dog. Please don't live like a dog. So one can become very fortunate by receiving the Srimad Bhagavatam, and they can learn that living like a beast or a dog is not a very suitable way to live. And they can easily, by hearing it, get a higher taste and come to the human form of life. That labdva sudarlabam idam bahusambhavante manusham artadam anityam api hadiraha tornam yateta napatet anumrittu yavan nishreya saya vishaya kalu sarvata syat. They can come to the human form of life, which they have. They're just not properly utilizing it. They can realize that this human form is very rarely achieved, and by receiving these books, they can get the idea that very quickly, very urgently, as soon as possible, they should engage in the devotional service of the Lord instead of engaging in activities of sense gratification, which are available to all the beasts, the hogs, dogs, camels, acids. All of them are engaging in these activities. So they can realize that this is the human form of life. I've got this very rare chance. I just got this Bhagavatam from some random person on a sidewalk in a tourist city. Maybe I should read it and utilize it for attaining the goal of my life, actually, to no longer see repeated birth and death by seeing the spiritual form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So those are a few points on this verse. Are there any comments or questions or corrections? Chastisements?
Nice point is that what's going on in Prabhupada's purports is all the discussions between all of the acharyas, like those purports of Baladev Vidyabhushan and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. That's what's in the Bhagavad Gita and in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And so it's amazing how it's amazing how that Janma karma chamya divyam evam yo vidi tattva tyaktva deham punarjanma naiti mam iti. So Arjuna, Krishna says that in the Bhagavad Gita, that if you understand my birth and my activities that are transcendental, then you become liberated. But then it's interesting how Prabhupada says, by that same discussion with the wrong mentality, then you go down further. But then it's nice that they may have that asuric mentality, but then if they read Prabhupada's books, even with that mentality, that is the purifying factor of it. They may just read translations of the Bhagavad Gita, but then it's not so much, sometimes that change may not occur because of their way, but then they're reading these discussions, Satam Prasangam, Mamavirya Samvido, there's all these purports of these ecstatic, inner, the realizations and the purports of all of the acharyas. And then there's, that's being Srila Prabhupada's insert, also, his own realizations within that. And so it's like ecstatic how that just by reading Bhagavad Gita, you're really having that, you're getting purified of that asuric mentality. So to hear from the pure devotees of the Lord, and you're getting to do that every day from Prabhupada's books. So it's pretty special. Still, they can see that there's it's still asuric, but they're becoming purified. That's why it's so important. And just by reading from the works of the acharyas in the form of Srila Prabhupada's books. So it's quite special that that these books can do that job. It's just amazing. Yeah.
Jai. I was hearing this memory, Srila Prabhupada memory from Shruti Kirti Prabhu. It was like the latest one that he did because there's a few that are filmed with him. And he was explaining that he wasn't reading Srila Prabhupada's books for whatever reason. When they were in India, he was very busy and all of these things, and he was saying he didn't have a taste for reading at that time. And Srila Prabhupada would call him into his office, and he would come into Srila Prabhupada's office. Srila Prabhupada would be sitting there with the book, and he would just be reading. And Shruti Kirti Prabhu would just sit there, and Srila Prabhupada just reading. And then Srila Prabhupada would say, "This book is so nice." And Shruti Kirti Prabhu would be listening. He would say, "This book is so nice. If you just read, I think he would say like one chapter of this book. If you just read one chapter of this book, you can become Krishna conscious." And Shruti Kirti Prabhu is sitting there listening. And then Srila Prabhupada indicates that he can go now. And then he would call him back in, and he would sit there, and Srila Prabhupada would be reading again. This would be like a month or two later. Shruti Kirti Prabhu would be like, "Okay, this is happening again." He'd be reading another one, like Teachings of Lord Chaitanya or a different book, and he'd say, "This book is so nice." Shruti Kirti Prabhu would be sitting there. It's really funny if you hear him explain it, because he's got his whole mood that he was in at that time. And he was like a little bit bewildered by what was going on. And Srila Prabhupada would then say, if you read just one, I think he said like one verse and purport, then you can become Krishna conscious. And still, he would go on, he wasn't reading, and Prabhupada called him into his room again. He's reading again, and he knew what was going on again. He said, "This book is so nice." And this time he just looks at Shruti Kirti Prabhu, and they're looking at each other. And he said, "If you just read one word, you can become Krishna conscious." So, yeah, the benefit of getting these books, or even there's statements about just touching the book even, the benefit is so amazing. So what to speak of when we have the books always on us, and we're looking at them all day long, trying to get somebody to take them. The benefit is immeasurable. So, Satatam Kirtayanto Mam, the devotees of the Lord, they always engage in kirtan, glorifying the Lord. So we have a great opportunity, especially with how nicely things have been are always being arranged by devotees here on different Sankirtan spots to go like back to back to back to back. So there's always such a good opportunity to be engaging in Sankirtan, the highest activity that a living entity can do in the material world. Sorry, I'm starting to ramble as a reply to your question. But was there to your comment? Is there another comment or correction or question? Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. I had a question regarding just preaching to the faithless, and how what's the difference between someone who's envious and just flat out ignorant? Because sometimes it seems like even the envious, obviously the envious people are very ignorant, but for instance, we were on Harinam last time we were on Harinam, and there was those group of black kids just joking around, and they were messing with sticking the middle finger up at us, Wow. All of them were just acting insane, but it was obviously they're just little kids, and they we don't take that so seriously, and it wasn't like such a huge obstruction for the Harinam. So it didn't seem like there's really any harm done, and probably Krishna wouldn't take it so seriously either. But how do you distinguish someone who's envious, and who's just ignorant?
Yeah,
You know?
ignorant means that they don't know any better, like a child. So they don't know. So then when you tell them about Krishna, then they can, or about the philosophy, then they can take to it, they can accept it. They can appreciate the knowledge that they're getting. But envious means that you say something about Krishna and they become more angry immediately. So those people we avoid. Like you sometimes there's like just a crazy person who comes up just like yelling. Maybe it's like a homeless person or whatever, and they're just angry. And any like energy you put towards them, it just makes things worse. So those persons, it's described, I think in Nectar of Destruction, the word used is neglect. So neglect, just like, sorry, this example's a little messed up, but like a dog sometimes gets neglected in the car, and the person goes in the store and the dog dies because it's like hot outside. So that's neglect. It means no attention. So because any attention that's given to them, it makes them make more offenses, and then we might also make offenses. So it just makes the situation worse. But ignorant, they can hear and appreciate. And then also that verse where Krishna is explaining in the Bhagavad Gita that, what is it? There's a purport where Srila Prabhupada explains that the devotees of the Lord are more merciful than the Lord because they understand the mission of the Lord. And so they go to those persons who are even inimical to try to give them Krishna consciousness. So we also hear that sometimes if one is advanced or is a Madhyama Adhikari or a preacher, they can even convince those who are envious. And of course there might be different degrees of enviousness that different devotees are able to tackle. My Guru Maharaj gives an example how they were doing this kirtan in a tent in Washington, D.C. Kirtan, this is the first thing I did, but they're doing a kirtan. I think it was actually there was like a band at that time that was doing like some pretty funky kirtans. It might have been with that group. And so they're doing this kirtan in Washington, D.C., and some like college guys who are clearly just looking to like make trouble, they come to the tent and they're like laughing at them and they're just making jokes, and it's just like, it's a big charade. But it started raining a lot there. And so those college guys, they actually came and they stayed in that tent for a while. And by the end of the day, they're actually dancing and chanting with the devotees. And at the end, they came up and apologized. And they're like, "We're sorry, we came here just to like make fun of you guys and this and that. But this was like the best time we've had." And so even those who are like inimical, like those kids who are like flicking off the kirtan or whatever, they can become purified actually by the chanting, by engaging them in devotional service somehow. Thank you. Is there any other comments?
Prabhu, you are mentioning the image of God as Atlas holding up the earth, right? Is that also... So you were mentioning that the general image of God that people may think of is Atlas holding up the earth. Is that also discussion in Asurik Bhav?
Is that also a discussion in Asurik Bhav?
Yeah.
Oh, that God is like struggling to hold up the earth?
Uh-huh.
You could say it is because it's not actually proper knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that He's able to carry everything out in existence without being encumbered. It's not a burden for Him. He's the supreme enjoyer. So it is kind of that is an Asuric mentality, and the idea that, okay, God's just like me. So if I have to do some big task, it's a heavy burden. My muscles are strained. I'm going to be tired. So they're thinking that Krishna is equal to them. He's just like me. He's got to work and suffer. But actually, Krishna is beyond any kind of work, as he explains in the Bhagavad Gita. There's no work for him. But still, he'll do
these different activities for the benefit of all living entities. They can learn from his example. So yeah, to think that he's struggling, it's just like equating him to like an ordinary person.
Is that more ignorance? Because it seems like enviousness would be that saying like, oh, because it seems like they have an awe and reverence for that. That oh God, look at God, He's isn't holding up the whole universe for us. He's struggling in order to keep us. That seems to be their mood, not so much that it's a mundane, ignorant conception of God. But is it enviousness? Because enviousness would be, see God, look how low God is. He's struggling. Look at him. That's not God. That seems like that would be fall along enviousness. Because we see other religions we're describing as not envious of God, but ignorant of God. Just like Christianity has this misconception of God being a big old man with a beard because he's the oldest. And then you've got Muslims who think of God as being impersonal, that you can't say that he's a person or has any attributes. So it seems like it's a veil of ignorance more than enviousness, because enviousness would be that more or less like a little bit along rejection also. Is that, what do you...
That makes sense. I would think there's some enviousness there because it's like equating the Supreme Lord with like my position. I'm like bringing him down. Yeah,
it's a mundane conception.
Because it's like then he's not actually that much better than me.
Yeah.
He's a little stronger, but he's still like suffering.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it just seems like that's more of an ignorant, because they accept him as God at the same time. But because they accept him as the supreme being, but they just it's like mundane conception. They see themselves. They see only through their lens. So is that not a level of ignorance?
It's definitely ignorance.
Yeah.
It's at the end of the day, everyone's ignorance is stemming from their enviousness of Krishna. That okay, he's the big boss. He's in the center. Actually, I want to try to be in the center, and then from that, everything else is coming. That now they got lust, anger, greed, so many misconceptions, and all this. So yeah, there might be different ways to classify it. But at the end of the day, they're not knowing who he is due to enviousness.
And also there are people who like they're Christians and they worship God and they're very reverential. But then the moment they say Isha Upanishad, they like start blaspheming like anything. Like and then the moment they see any Prabhupada's book, then they start being super like offensive as well. So they can also like believe in God and also be like super envious.
Yeah.
So that's also there.
Yeah. Anything else? Matajis? Okay, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada